Let's build a dice rolling simulator in Python. The project is going to look like this. We're going to have a prompt that says how many dice would you like to roll. Here we can enter numbers such as 1 and it will give us the result of that roll. We can also enter numbers such as 3 and it's going to give us 3 results of 3 different dice rolls. So we're effectively using a dice simulator. We can even say give us 10 rolls and it's going to give us 10 different dice rolls back. So it's a very simple program that you can use when you're playing some sort of board game or when you're creating your very own game in Python. And finally, if we want to exit, we can tap on exit and it's going to end the program for us with a very nice message that says thanks for playing. So it's a friendly message that the user will be happy to see. But let's jump right into writing the code. So the very first thing we want to do is import random, and random contains some functionality that helps us generate random numbers. Then we're going to create a function called roll dice, and we're going to create a parameter called amount, which is going to be of type integer, and initially it's going to be set to 2. So if the user doesn't specify anything, it's going to roll 2 dice anyway, and it's going to return to us a list of integer, because we want to get those values back in a list and we want to make sure that they are integers. So the very first thing we need to do is check whether the amount is less than 0, less than or equal to 0. Because if the user types 0, that's quite ridiculous. You can't roll 0 dice, or at least not to my understanding. So we're going to say that if it's less than or equal to 0, we're going to raise a value error. We're going to tell the program, okay, the user is doing something funky. We need to handle this value error, and we're going to handle this later in the program. But anyways, if the user types 0 or less than 0, we're going to raise that error. Next, we're going to define some rolls, which is going to be a list of type integer, so we can store those rolls. But first, we need to, of course, create this list to store the rolls. Now, for I in range of the amount that the user has defined, we're going to create a random roll. So the random roll of type integer is going to equal random.random integer. And that's going to be from 1 to 6. So each time we go through this loop, it's going to throw a die, or it's actually going to generate a number between 1 and 6. So that's going to simulate throwing a die. And next we can type in rolls.append because we want to append that number. So append random roll. And finally, at the bottom, once we're done doing all of that, we just want to return the rolls. So that's our main function. This is the function that's going to roll all of the dice for us. Next, we're going to create a main function. So def main, and we're going to insert our main functionality here. So we want our program to be in an infinite loop. And to do that, we'll type in while true. And while we are in this infinite loop, we're going to try the following. We're going to type in user input of type string is equal to the input, and we need to provide a prompt. And I'll actually make some more space. And this prompt is going to say, how many dice would you like to roll? But we also want to check that the user doesn't want to exit the program, because if the user types in exit, we want to make sure they can exit it without being stuck in this infinite loop. So if user input.lower, because we want to make sure that whatever the user types gets put down to a lowercase, because right now the user can type in something such as exit, and the program's not going to know what that means when we actually want the user to type in exit. So we're going to say if user input.lower is equal to exit, then we're going to do the following. So we don't have to worry about the user typing in uppercase exit, and that just ensures that we handle this properly. So let's remove that and let's take care of this exit. So here we'll type in thanks for playing, and we will break out of the while loop. Now, while we're still inside this try block, we need to try to pass the user input to an integer. And that pretty much means all we have to type in is int of user input. So we're not really doing anything at the moment. We just converted that user input to an integer, but we also want to roll the user input because the user input is actually the amount of dice we are rolling. So inside this, we can say roll dice. So now we're rolling the dice of the integer of user input. And we also want to print this. So once again, you can highlight everything, and by holding shift and your parentheses, it's going to place parentheses around it. And we're going to print this. So this line of code will actually print the result to the user. And as it is, it's going to return to us a list. But we are missing the except block, which is going to raise a value error if we do something wrong. And by something wrong, I mean what happens if the user types in, let's say, a or potato or banana, or types in something that's not a number. That's going to raise a value error. As you can see, inappropriate argument value, but it's of the correct type. So here we're going to print in parentheses, please enter a valid number. So now no matter what happens in the try block, if something goes wrong and it's a value error that actually caused it, we're going to get this executed. And the same thing's going to go with our roll dice function. If the amount is less than 0, we'll get this value error. And finally, with that being done, we can type in if name is equal to main to make sure we're executing the code in the correct script. And we can insert our main function. And with that, we can actually test the program by tapping on this green arrow. And here we can say we want to roll 3, and you'll get 3 results back. Otherwise, you can say 6, and we'll get 6 results back. But if you type in 0, it's going to say, please enter a valid number. If you say potato, it will also ask you to provide a valid number. Otherwise, if we do, let's say 2, we'll get 1 and 6. If we tap and do nothing, it's not going to give us anything. It's going to tell us to still enter a random number. So our program is working as it should. There's only one thing that we can do to improve it, and that is remove these brackets. Because right now it's quite an ugly user experience if we still have those brackets. So what I'm going to do here is add an asterisk in front of roll dice. And you can put this in front of any list, and it's going to unpack it. It means it's going to take out the values from that. And with that being put into place, we're going to add a separator, which is going to be this comma space. So this is part of the print function. It is an argument that just provides a separator for each one of the elements. And this asterisk here is going to unpack the list that we have. So the next time we actually run this, we can say we want 4 numbers back, and it's going to unpack them and place a comma in between each one of them. So that looks much nicer to the user. It doesn't have these weird brackets that a lot of people don't even know about. So let's also type in 10, or we can also type in 100, and it's going to generate as many dice rolls as we want. Now, as a personal challenge, I want you to try to get the total sum of the dice rolls and display it to the user every time they roll the dice. And that means pretty much that if the user says, okay, I want 3 dice rolls, and that brings you back 3, 2, and let's say 4, it should also show the total. So we want to have something such as, let's say 9 as the total, so that the user can easily understand what the total sum of all the values are, and that will provide them a nicer user experience. So that's your challenge for this lesson, because again, if they insert 3 and they get these numbers back, it's quite cool that you get those rules, but a total following that would be so much nicer.